This is the very first episode of the Cove Recovery Podcast. It will be myself and Parker and our great friend Dan, who's going to be helping us out, producing and adding to the content. This podcast is mostly going to be dedicated to Parker and I having a good time for the most part, and then to add a little bit more to the resources available for people in early recovery, long-term recovery, whatever it may be. We're both in recovery ourselves. I've got my dry date is May 7th, 2017, and Parker just celebrated his 3 years.
October 10th.
October 10th. So congratulations, man.
Thank you, sir.
So I'm a little over almost 3.5, I guess. But this is something that we wanted to do to kind of give back to the community that's given us so much, and to add a little bit of something in there, and of course talk about our business a little bit. And so I guess we'll kind of dive right into that. Parker and I run the Cove Recovery Solutions, something that we started in January of this year, January 2020. We met in sober living, and we kind of came up together at a place called The Door. I mean, we were there I was there for about a year. I think you were there for a little bit longer.
It was over a year, yeah.
Yeah, a little over a year. And that's where we met. That's where we started doing our thing together. It's where we became good friends. I drag him out to H&I's pretty regularly, and we kind of just like our recovery started to evolve around each other pretty regularly. I got an opportunity to go help a guy out with what was the Cove used to be known as the 12-Step Warriors, I think is what the name was. We changed that quickly. But I got that opportunity to go do that, and I did that for a year. Parker would help me out with it from time to time when I'd go out of town. But it was just one house, 5 beds, nice small community, nice small facility, and it was good for what it was doing. And I decided I wanted to do more with it, and I wanted it to be a little bit better, and I wanted a little more control over what was going on. So in the end of 2019, which would have been about a year of me being there doing that as a house manager, I decided that I want to do more. And I offered the guy that owned it, to take over, to buy the business and the property and stuff, and we figured out a way to do that, got all that put together, and here we are now. January we did that, and then we got another property at the same time, so we've got the two houses, and made it a little bit bigger, had some separation, some direction for the business, got 10 beds available most of the time, or not available, but we have 10 beds that we can put guys in, and we'll just try to form a community that Lubbock, I don't know necessarily needed it, but I think there was a call for exactly what we're doing. Homes, small communities, right? And so, January of this year we started doing this, and it's something that I'm really excited about growing and going forward. And with this podcast, something that we want to do is just to be able to break out of our leadership shells and come in here and have fun and talk about recovery, talk about fitness, dating, girls, whatever comes up, I guess.
Right, yeah, we want to talk about all those things, even just day-to-day stuff, what we went through that day, experience we had, whether it's recovery related or not, spirituality, like you said, fitness, but definitely, like he was talking about with the Cove, we have 2 locations. This is something that we thought of doing at a restaurant after celebration one night. We just thought, we need to do something more than sponsoring. We're still in school. We can't, get a job in our career. We can't be therapists, counselors. We still have time for that. And, this is something that Marcus was already doing with the old company. And, we just had the idea of, let's try to make this thing grow. Let's make it into something else. And Marcus said, we wanted to bring a home. That there's a lot of sober livings here, but I think one of the things some of those sober livings lacked, and something that we wanted to bring to the table, was a home for these guys. Because I know when I was in sober living, it felt temporary. It felt like that wasn't my residence. That felt like that's I didn't feel I needed to be there. I was supposed to be there for longer than 3 months. Um, so we have wanted, and it's really something that the company has just evolved into
Yeah, that
over the
wasn't.
past year.
Yeah, that wasn't the initial vision. I don't think. I think we went into this deal kind of hoping for the best, and I think something that we've always done is God gave us something, right? Gave us this desire, this drive to be more than what we were doing. A higher power, however you want to look at it, but there was no real direction or vision for this. This kind of just organically happened, and that I'm really excited about what else is going to come up organically and just see what else happens. And I think it was important to talk that you said that, because I never expected it to become like a home. But then we had some guys start saying that. We started trying to make it feel that way, and that's what I'm focused on now, is like making these places an actual, like, you feel like you're coming home at the end of the day, because community is important, right? And I think that we can kind of go right into one of the things that I want to talk about, was like why going somewhere other than your actual home after treatment, or after getting sober, finding a place that gives you an opportunity to develop into the person that you're going to be. Something I thought about one time, I guess we were in a house meeting or something, but this thought just popped into my head that with all the people that I used to be around, that I used to use with, drink with, hang out with, whatever it may have been, all the people that even like work, I lived 200 miles from here. So it's not too far. So it's kind of the same West Texas thing, but it was a small rural town. And I spent a lot of my time being who I was in my addiction, right? Around all the people there, all of my friends, my family, all the people that I was interacting with regularly. And I imprinted myself on those people. So whenever I was around those people, they basically kind of reflected that imprint back onto me. And so when I came here to Lubbock and I went to treatment and I got clean, I went through sober living, and I started working the steps and having this fundamental change in who I was. Even 2-3 months sober, I'd go back and I'd feel myself falling back into the same the same actions, the same even the same like I'd say something in the same way, like I used to. And it's like I had kind of forgotten who I was back then, because I was around these people again, and who I was had been imprinted on them as an alcoholic and a drug addict in active addiction. They knew me as that guy, right? And so every time they talked to me, or I'd have an encounter with somebody who knew me back then, it would start to kind of come back out of them onto me, and I'd start adopting those behaviors again, those mindset, and I felt like I had basically imprinted myself, because for years I was like that, and those people just knew me like that. And now that when I came here and I started having this fundamental change, it was so quick to go back to exactly how I used to be. And it wasn't because I was, in the geographic location. Maybe sure that had something to do with it, because I remember driving down those streets and I'd have these like memories of like, oh, I used to get fucked up here. Yeah. Like I remember almost hitting a car there. Like I lived there one time, and that was a little bit of a trap house kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, so I'd have these memories of like that going on as well. But for the majority of it was the people. I had just imprinted on those people. And now I feel like here in Lubbock in recovery, I've imprinted that person onto the people here. And so it gives me an opportunity to, if I start slipping into a different mindset or start, feeling in a different way, I get around the people that I've gotten comfortable with and who know me as I am today. They start reflecting that back onto me too. Right. So it's allowed me to develop into the person who I am going to be in recovery as a sober person, right? Being in this area, being in this place, being around you guys, because you guys don't know me as an alcoholic or drug addict, right? You guys just know me as a person in recovery. And I think that's important to give yourself as a person that's going through this process behind us, an opportunity to develop who you're going to be. You know what I mean? And give yourself like a clean slate to do that developmental process.
And I think that's one of the coolest compliments that I get from people, are like, I can't imagine you in your addiction. Yeah. I can't imagine. I tell them my stories and they're like, oh, I can't imagine you doing that. Or, it's just, that's one of the biggest compliments I can get, because that shows that like what this recovery community here in Lubbock has done for me. What people like Dan and Marcus and the people that I'm around that y'all have done. Y'all have helped me. Like I see that on you, and then it reflects on me and who I am.
Yeah.
But I definitely agree. If I would have gone back home right after, that's a huge part of my story. Was I decided to stay in Lubbock in this community on my second to last day in treatment.
Mm-hmm.
If I would have gone back, I would have fallen back into that, how other people viewed me. I would have been that exact same person. And, staying in this community has given me that chance to open up and be who I was intended to be and who I am today. Mm-hmm. And that's big for me with our guys coming and staying with us and staying connected in our community, having guys staying longer terms with us than our original 3 to 6 months, what guys typically do. It gives them a chance to kind of imprint who they have become now in their recovery onto these new guys coming in. Mm-hmm. It gives them that opportunity to grow, learn from other people, other peers, because that's what I did. I think I know I have the least amount of time sober of all my friends. All my friends have, other than one has like a month more than me, the rest of them are like almost 6 months more sober than me. And that's who I had to surround myself with. And I when you talk about that, that's what I think of. I'm like, damn, I'm an image of like my friends around me who had 6 months more sober, more time than I did. And that who is, that came back onto me, and now it reflects this is who I am because of the people I hung out with, the people who I stuck with, the people that drug me to H&I's every week for a year.
Show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good, I thought about that concept for a while and I haven't been able to elaborate on it now. And so I may do that now. I may end up hijacking this to kind of elaborate on that concept because I wanted to keep it like as a very basic idea until we did this, because I knew that this would be a good place to explore that. But I knew that at the very minimum, whenever I am, I got the opportunity to be somebody totally different here. You know what I mean? I got to let go of the insecurities, the fears and all that stuff in treatment. And I got to kind of like become a raw person. I was open and raw, and I wasn't for the first 2 weeks. First 2 weeks, I just said, I didn't want to fucking be in that place. You know what I mean? I did not want to be in treatment at all. And I remember the very first moment. So whenever they used to do packets, and they may still, but Victor was my counselor, and he gave me these stupid packets, and I hated them. And so it was like you filled out like all these different questions, and it was about step 2, I think, step 2 and step 3, and about having some sort of experience with a higher power and then giving it over to that. And I was bullshitting my way through like all of it, and I knew that he was going to dissect everything that I wrote. And so I knew he was going to ask me about it because he had done that already. He had made it kind of difficult for me to bullshit my way out of it. I remember one of the first times I met him, he was like, just so you know, if you try to manipulate me, I'll fuck you up with it, like with my mind. Like he's like, I'm not going to let you do that. You're not going to manipulate me at all. And I was very intimidated by that. I was like very defensive. I was like, all right, dude, I don't know how this is going to go, but I know it's going to be very uncomfortable. And I respect that a lot about him. And that's probably why I am the way I am now, because I needed that. I needed somebody that wasn't going to put up with my bullshit. Right. I had been doing that for years, and I had been able to manipulate my way through all kinds of different situations and scenarios and get what I wanted. And he told me he wasn't going to let me do that. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to show you, motherfucker. And like, I'm like going through this packet, trying to figure out a way to manipulate my way out of treatment. Like, let me just, I knew the drill. I'd been in a psych ward before. Tell them what they want to hear and they'll let you go home. You know what I mean? Right. And so I was doing that this entire time through this packet. And there was one question where I was like, man, I don't know what I can put here that's going to make a lot of sense that I can elaborate on, where he'll just leave me the fuck alone about it, and I can't figure out what to write. And it was 2:00 in the morning because they gave me trazodone or something, and I didn't react well to it. I was up for like 2 days. And so the overnight tech let me sit out in the living room and with a little lamp, and I was just there trying to bullshit my way through this packet. And there was a question, I don't remember what it said now, but it was something kind of challenging. And I was trying to put down some elaborate response that I knew that he wouldn't, give me too much shit about. And I remember just in a chair like this, pushing myself away from the table and saying, fuck, I don't know. And like literally putting my hands up like this. And that was the moment that God said, all right, it's time. It's time for you to actually relinquish control. And that was like 2 weeks into treatment. And it gave me this overwhelming sense of peace to say, I don't have to lie anymore.
Right.
I don't have to manipulate my way through this anymore. And I don't remember what I wrote now. I probably wrote some stupid shit, but it probably didn't make very much sense. But it didn't matter anymore. The packet was irrelevant. All of that was irrelevant. I had made the decision to actually give my will and my life over to God in that moment. And I had come in there agnostic. I didn't know who or what it was that existed, and I didn't care. And in that moment, I still didn't really necessarily care who it was or what it was, but I knew that I wasn't a slave to myself anymore. You know what I mean? I had given up that control to somebody else, and I was able to actually experience what was happening in treatment. And I had been defiant the entire time. Like, he had brought up sober living a couple times. He had brought up, actually, getting into some intense therapy. And I was very defiant. I didn't want to do anything with it. I remember at one point I said, there's something that you're not telling me about yourself, and I don't know what it is. And I could just tell that he was like holding something back from me. And it turned out there was a lot of similarities between the two of us. And there was something that he wasn't telling me. He told me, and it was just like, holy shit, like now I can have a relationship with you. Now I can have a conversation with you. And it made me feel so much more comfortable knowing that he was in recovery, that we had some things in common, and that I didn't have to feel, guarded with him anymore. And he made me sit there and talk to an empty chair one time, and I thought, this is the dumbest fucking shit I'm ever going to do. And I hated it at first. It was like, this is not, I don't know what kind of crazy shit this guy's got me in here doing. But then all of a sudden I started bawling and crying and like feeling this overwhelming relief of the therapy working. And so slowly but surely I started to concede to the fact that this was going to work. And then the last couple of days that I was there, very similar to how it went with you, he was like really trying to get me to commit to sober living. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And, finally I said, all right, I'll at least go look at it. And I did, and Will was in there with me, and we were roommates. Well, I don't think we were roommates in treatment, but we were really good friends. We were discharging, 2 days apart from each other, and it was like, at least I'll know somebody there. I've never lived in Lubbock before. That was one of my biggest fears, is like I would come from a really small town where you could literally walk across the other end of town, and there was never an issue with getting around. Like, and I had a vehicle here at the time. And so I had all these anxieties, and having somebody that I knew in treatment going to sober living with me at least made it tolerable. At least I said, okay, at least I'll give that a chance. And then we walk into the apartment, and then there's fucking musical equipment everywhere. There's a guitar leaned up against the TV. There's fucking shitty amps all over the place. And there was
a shitty amp back
there. There was shitty. I mean, it was giant. I remember it was on wheels. That one that you had was this big old thing on wheels. You remember?
I had a little one then, I think.
I don't
know. Maybe I can't remember. I don't know. I thought I had a combo amp back then. But.
Anyways, there was stuff all over the place, and I was like, "Oh fuck!" Some wannabe musician in here that doesn't know how, that's gonna keep me up all night.
Accurate.
And then to come to realize it's him.
Yeah.
And not only was he a musician, and then like I can't remember if it was when I moved. It was when I moved in. My dad walked in there. My dad's a musician, and he was like looking at all the equipment everywhere. And then he started talking. And me and my dad had just got done with like a really intense family therapy like a few days before, and we still weren't like we were okay. We were on okay terms then, but it was like really raw.
Yeah.
And I was like, this motherfucker's over here hanging out with this dude that he doesn't even know, talking about music, and he's like, what about me? You know what I mean? And I had felt that was one of the disconnects between me and my dad all the time, was like, what about me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We had this horrible relationship for a while, and it was just all kind of funny how it played out, especially now that you're one of my best friends, because it was just like, at that moment I was a super defiant. I didn't want to deal with it. I was anxious about it all, and I couldn't, now looking back at it, I couldn't have asked for a better outcome.
Right.
all these suggestions were given to me. I was very anal about it, or maybe anal is not the right word, but I was very, defiant. I didn't want to deal with any of it. I didn't want to have anything to do with all of that. But now it's given me opportunity to have friends and opportunities with this business and this podcast and all these different things. If you would have told me this would have happened 3 years ago, I would have just been like, you're fucking crazy, dude. Right. There's not a chance that I'm ever going to be anything like that in 3 years. And here we are now, and it's just surreal to think about that.
It's so funny to me too, because I remember like my first impression of you was like, I was like, oh, dude, kind of seems like a hard ass. And then you moved in, and it was like we vibed real easily, me, you, and Will, and we had a bunch of really good times. And yeah, it's funny to see the progress,
Yeah, it's something that I want to cherish forever. That's why I'm really glad we're doing this, because at least at the very least we'll have all of this, no matter what. Like, we'll always have this to look back on, to have stored somewhere. You know what I mean? And so that was another reason I wanted to do this, because at the end of the day, we're just all hanging out here talking shit, and we're gonna have this forever. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right. I like that.
And one story I do want to tell, because I've been saving this one.
Oh shit!
And it always comes up in the back of my head, because I have this cup.
Oh god! I was such a piece of shit. I was the typical piece of shit sober living roommate.
And I've kept the cup this whole time, and I think we need to probably bring it over here and put it here somewhere. Is it a
Dickies?
It's a Dickies. Rudy's cup. Rudy's barbecue cup, one of those big plastic ones. Yeah. Like a 32-ounce plastic cup. And I kept it on top of the fridge, and I would come home every day and I'd dump all my change in it. And I was like saving up money for myself to, like, I don't know, because I was poor. I didn't have any fucking money. Right. I had nothing. Like, I don't remember where I was getting change from. I guess from my parents would give me money. And I'd put it in there, and I'd put it on top of the fridge, and I never even thought about it. And one day I went in there, and all the quarters were gone. There was a ton of nickels and dimes, but not a single quarter in there. And I was like, what the fuck? I know I put quarters in there. And I don't even remember how it ended up playing out. But eventually Dan was like, oh, yeah, I took all your quarters.
It was for cigarettes one morning.
Yeah. He had gone to buy cigarettes. There was probably only $5 worth of quarters in there.
Some parliaments or some shit.
That's great.
Oh man, but yeah, I mean, all that stuff happening the way it did, I never would have guessed it would have got us to this point. And all that said to say, like, whenever we're really not wanting to take suggestion, when I don't want to take suggestion from somebody else, I think about that kind of thing. And I try to bring that kind of stuff up. I want that information. I want those experiences out there for people who are being faced with decisions, who are being faced with suggestion and being defiant with it. Like, I went through a lot of horrible shit in my addiction. I put myself through a lot of trauma. I put myself through a lot of difficult situations. And now that I date a lot of normies, right? And they always ask me, like, oh, do you ever regret what you've done? A lot. The biggest question I always get when I talk about my old life, right, the experiences that I've had, because that's like one of the second things that everybody asks me is, like, the first thing is, oh, so you don't drink or do any drugs? You don't do anything? It's always the first thing. It's like, no, nothing, which blows people's minds sometimes. But the second thing that usually happens is, like, well, what did you do? Like, what do you mean? Like, what were some of the things you did? Like, how bad were you? And so I have, like, a select few stories that I bring up that I try to, keep it kind of PG, or keep it kind of where some people aren't going to get completely freaked out and run off. And like, it always ends up them saying something along the lines of, like, do you ever regret doing some of that stuff? And it's like, no, not once have I looked back at the shit I do. Sometimes I cringe a little bit at stupid shit I did, but I don't ever regret the things I did, because I know now, today, all those experiences are being used to help somebody else. To hopefully somebody else doesn't have to go through the shit that I went through. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's what I want all of this to be for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's, and another thing about the importance of, for sober living for me, and like you're saying, we'll be able to always remember this. You'll have those stories, and it's just building the friendship that us three have. That I know if I did go back home and I stayed sober, and I would have made some friends, they wouldn't be able to hold me accountable the way that y'all know y'all are allowed to hold me accountable in any aspect of my life and anything in my life. If y'all call me out on this, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. If y'all two or my sponsor call me out on something and say, hey, you're acting this way, and in my mind, I don't think I am, but I have like the utmost trust and respect and know that y'all have y'all's like absolute like just want good for me and, you know, my heart in mind, that I'm going to fucking believe y'all. You know, if you're telling me I'm being an ass and you're very persistent about it, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, you know what? Like, Marcus isn't going to lie to me. I trust him. That kind of friendship, those kind of friendships have been crucial to my recovery, because I can convince myself of just about anything. You know what I'm saying? I can convince myself that I'm fucking 6'6" and I play for the fucking Lakers if I give myself enough time, you know? But that's why I have to have these friends that, you know, that I found in sober living and that have helped me become who I am today and still hold me to who I am today, hold me true to what I want to do for a living. And that is the biggest importance of me, for me, well, one of the big importance of going to sober living for. And, of course, getting the memories. Fucking Dan playing his music at midnight when I work at 5 a.m.
I have a Snapchat of you saved. Excuse me. I have a lot of Snapchats of you saved. I have a lot of things. I could create a whole album of you on my phone. You know, all the content I have of you doing silly things. I know. But one of my favorite ones, I need to find it, is you're playing, I think it's Santeria out in the parking lot. And it's completely dark, and it's an acoustic guitar. And you're just out there just yelling the song. And it sounded great, but it's super loud. And there's basically nobody out there. You're just out there by yourself, kind of just jamming. And that was like that's one of my favorite memories from sober living. Like, there's a ton of them that I like to look through my Snapchat store memories and stuff, and like remember what it was like to be the fucking the 90-day guy. You know what I mean? Just kind of fumbling through life, like figuring shit out. But some of those memories are some of my most cherished, because it's like that was when I was at my most vulnerable. You know what I mean? I was learning a whole new way of life. And I think you kind of touched on something about like that trust amongst each other that we've developed. And it's not, it's a stretch to make this comparison, but I listen to a lot of, you know, people that are in the military, right? That talk about the way that that brotherhood is formed, right? And it's, like I said, it's a real stretch to make this comparison, but I feel like there's something there where we go through a very traumatic thing together, right? Or we've been through something very similar. Our traumas are very similar, mostly self-inflicted. That's why I think it's a stretch to make the comparison.
Right.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, but you know, we go through something traumatic, and then here we are trying to get better together, right? And so there's this brotherhood that we're like, no matter what, I know that y'all have been through something equivalent or worse than I have. And so, and you're here today, right? And doing equivalently as good or better than me. So there's just this respect that I have for everybody in this position where we are today. You know what I mean? Somebody that's gone through this process, that I know no matter what, if there's an opinion of me from somebody like you guys that I trust and I believe is doing the right things with their lives, it's like I don't have to question that opinion. I know that it's there, it is solid, it is law. Then I have to kind of, you know, try and develop from that, and try and learn from that, because I think it's important to realize that we, even though I don't want to necessarily listen to it, even though I don't, like you said, I can lie to myself all day long. I can tell myself that I'm all kinds of different things, and I can get extremely egotistical, and my head will be this fucking big all of a sudden. But I know that if, like, one of you guys tells me that it'll immediately pop, it'll immediately shrink, and I'll bring myself back down to earth, because that is the reality of it. Y'all's opinion is the actual reality, when my conflated ego is just some sort of mythical land that I've created in my head. You know what I mean? So I think it's important, and that's one thing I learned from that, that concept of like the military is like there's a brotherhood, and another thing that I've kind of adopted from that, I guess, or learned from listening to guys talk about that, is something that I've tried to give to these houses and to the people that I work with and all the people that I help, right, that we help, is like a decentralized command, right? And I've talked about this a little bit in a house meeting, but where I'm not going to be there holding every client's hand as they go through this process. I'm not going to be there holding every sponsee's hand as they go through this process. I'm not going to baby them and help them, get through every single stage of their life, because nobody did that for me. I was given direction and I was told to figure it out. Right. And I was told to fumble through it. And if there was something that came up and I was upset about it or stressed about it or whatever, and I'd call whoever I was working with at the time for a sponsor, they'd tell me, well, have you prayed about it? Have you meditated about it? And well, no, like, that's why I'm calling you. And it's immediately like, well, then go do those fucking things before you call me. Right. And I was always met with some sort of aggression. and it made me realize that it's because that person's not there to save my life. That person's there to teach me how to save my life. Right. And it's the same way that kind of decentralized command concept works, is where instead of somebody telling me what to do every task of the way, like, all right, now it's time for you to go do this at this time, and it's time for you to do this at this time, and it's time for you, and this is how you do it, explain it from top to bottom. That's not how it has to work. It's not how it can't, because at the end of the day, once they leave treatment, once you leave sober living, whatever, that person's not going to be there anymore. Right. To hold your hand. Where, more than anything, my goal is to teach people how to live the way that I've been taught how to live. Right. Because it's worked for me. You know what I mean? I understand that it's different for everybody. And one thing that I wanted to do is adapt to everybody's different way of learning, different way of living. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be there every single day to tell you to clean up your fucking drawers off the floor. You know what I mean? Right. You know what I mean? Like, I can't do that, because then I'm just doing you a disservice. I'm doing the people that we're helping a disservice.
Something that just popped in my head when you were talking about that is like, a lot of people think that like you go through your addiction and then you go to treatment and then you're good. Mm-hmm. But really the work starts when you get out of treatment. Yeah. And like, that's why sober living is so important. Like, I know for damn sure that, like, there was a moment when I got back from treatment and I was cleaning out my old house where I had my addiction at, that I lived with my ex. I found a syringe, and like, luckily I was like going to sober living the next day, and like, everything had worked out perfectly where I didn't relapse. But if I wasn't going to sober living and that had happened, I think I probably would have relapsed right then, and I would have been right back to where I was 60 days before, and it's really, it's pivotal, Everybody I know that has long-term sobriety went through sober living, and like I said, that's really where the work starts, It's important.
Yeah, somebody said something the other day, inpatient treatment and sober living are an ambulance to AA. And that's kind of like, I agree a little bit with that, because that almost discounts treatment and sober living. Right. But I agree with a big portion of that, is that is a way for you to dry up in treatment, get detox, get off of all of it, and get really fucking raw. Because I think saying that is kind of like discounting the fact that the treatment is extremely beneficial. Like some level of treatment, whether it be, inpatient, IOP, whatever, detox, whatever it may be, that's important. That's good. That holds the keys to the beginning of this thing, because there's a certain level of depth that you have to get into to do that. But I kind of agree with that, because all these things that get us through, we get through treatment, we get through sober living, but then what? Then what? But all of those things have to be, there's a lot of work that has to be done in treatment and sober living to develop a habit for the rest of your life. Right. And a big part of that is, whatever program you're working, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics. I mean, you can work all of them. I kind of have found myself, all over the place with them, primarily Alcoholics Anonymous, but I've bounced around from all of them. I've even, gone to made kind of church my thing for a period of time, and the community my thing. And I think it's important to note that, like, no matter what, my recovery program has been fluid from start to finish. It's never been like dedicated to one thing, hard and fast. I've been able to bounce around from one thing to another, but always keeping the community.
Right.
The community's kept me grounded. But yeah, I mean, somebody said that, and I thought it was a really interesting concept because, yeah, while that's true, we have to do a lot of fucking work when we're in those places to get us to where we're supposed to be.
And I think, that's one of the things that, a lot of people say that, like, spirituality is like your foundation. You get that started.
Mm-hmm.
You get that started, and then, that's the foundation of your recovery. And I've also learned, and, I like try to apply things to other, situations in my life, and that's what sober living was for me. It was my foundation. That's where I stuck my feet in the mud, started absorbing AA, started absorbing suggestions from peers who had more time than me, from counselors, from house managers. That's where I really stuck my feet in the ground and started building that foundation, learning how to fucking clean my room again, learning how to cook again, just things like that, I if I would have gone back home, I would have never done again. I would have kept eating fucking Taco Bell and all this other stuff. I wouldn't have grown.
I had a roommate one time that did not know how to do laundry at all. I had to teach him how to do laundry. And he wasn't like from a bad family or anything, but he was just extremely coddled.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I taught several people how to do laundry, how to wash dishes, resumes. I mean, it's incredible the limited experience that people have coming to this. And I think that's because that's the other thing is like sober living gets looked at as like, oh, it's just a place to go live and get sober. No, you learn a lot of different things.
Right.
Like I was a messy person. I was very dirty. I don't know, dirty is the right word, but I was extremely messy. Like I had this really. Hey, go look at my apartment now. It's beautiful. I had this compulsion of not only drinking all the time, but I would save the beer cans for absolutely no reason.
Dude, I had so many bottles. So many bottles.
You could walk into I can't remember, it was a 2 or 3 bedroom house where I used to live, and the entire, like the living room was like 2 living rooms put together, basically. It was this giant room, and in the middle there was like an entertainment center, but like one half of it was like 75 beer cans. Just like all over the floor, all over the table. Like, I don't know why I did that. And then the kitchen was just all beer cans. I wouldn't throw them away. And so, of course, naturally, everything else was messy. I never cleaned after myself. I never cooked or anything. I was hardly ever there. But there was usually clothes everywhere, and the bathroom is usually kind of gross. But now, like that, even thinking about that gives me anxiety. And a lot of it happened, that shift happened in sober living. I remember after I left, I spent a year in sober living. After I left and went to my own apartment, I came home one day and the floor was kind of dirty. And in the back of my head, I heard Anthony's voice telling me how fucking gross that floor was. And Anthony was a house manager at the time, for everybody else listening. That was like a weird moment of like, ooh, something happened when I was there. I don't know if it was trauma or if like whatever it was, it worked. You know what I mean? And like that concept it's carried throughout my recovery. I mean, you go into my house right now, I have 2 vacuums, and one of them's a wet vac, one of them's not. And like there's everything's dusted, everything's put in its place for the most part. I've got another compulsion with 1 gallon water jugs that I don't know why I've been hanging on to those. I have, I think 22 I counted this morning. 22 1 gallon water jugs underneath my dining room table.
What?
I don't know. I don't know.
For the apocalypse, man. He's filling back up.
They're all empty.
Now they're full of piss.
They're all empty right now. I keep saying, because it's only 25 cents to go fill them up. So I'm like, I'm going to go. What is it? I'm going to go. But I live on the second story. I'm not going to carry
40 gallons of water.
It's going to be really hard to get those. First of all, get them all, the loose ones, down without losing all the lids. Oh, yeah. And then getting them back up is going to be an exercise in and of itself. But that's the one compulsion I still have. I guess that one's not too bad, but it's just weird. It doesn't make very much sense. But aside from that, my apartment is relatively clean, and I have a dog living in there, so that's a challenge. So it's vacuuming every day, and it's a big problem. But that was something that I remember thinking back. And now, whenever I notice that it gets dirty, I don't hear that in the back of my voice anymore. But I think about that moment where I was like, I heard his voice in my head. So it's not like I actually still hear his voice, but I think about that moment where it freaked me out that I did. And so I don't know. I try to kind of emulate that now with guys, and I walk into a room and I just start harassing them about their space because it's dirty or there's dirty clothes on the floor or something like that. Because hopefully when they get out on their own, they see that their room is kind of disarray, that they hear my voice harassing them. That's my goal.
And that's a cool thing though, because like we have witnessed guys get better at keeping their shit clean. You know, we have one guy that folds his sheets, makes his bed, everything's perfect. We have another guy that wasn't like that when he got to us. Now he is. We have one guy that has been extremely messy, and now he's doing very good. But it's cool to see, that worked for us, and then it's continuing working for other people. Little things like that are things you get in sober living.
Yeah.
Which has helped Marcus a lot.
It's helped me a lot. Yeah, because I would not be able to live my life the way I used to live it now, because I was a messy son of a bitch. I mean, I was really messy. And part of that, a big part of that is I used to get so much anxiety about it, too. I'd come home and I was like, oh, my God, there's so much shit everywhere. And it would stress me out. But then I would just drink to deal with that stress. I was like, well, I'm not going to address the actual problem. I'm just going to drink to fix the problem, which is obviously the huge perpetual cycle that I was always in.
It doesn't work.
No, it never works. I would just add to the beer can pile by drinking more, and it would just all of a sudden it'd get to the point where I'd break and freak out, have a meltdown or whatever, kick my dog, whatever may have been the outlet at that time. That poor dog has been through some shit.
She's a great dog, though.
She's traumatized. That's why she's so good, because she's been traumatized her whole life. But she's a good dog. But I mean now, because now when I come home, I'm not stressed out about those things.
Right.
Like there's not that stress. I mean, I have stress with everything else, with school, work, student org, like all kinds of different things. But when I come home, that's one less thing that's stressful for me. And that's what I try to kind of, help other people understand, help guys understand that I don't want you to be clean because I want you to be clean. I want you to be clean because it makes you feel better too.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you, clean up your haircut a little bit, clean up your beard a little bit, whatever it may be, clean your space, have control over what you have control over. You know what I mean? Because we're relinquishing control over so many things. The few things that we can control, why not do our best to make them the best that they can be? Right. And then we can feel better overall. But anyway.
So what's your thoughts on like this being, this podcast is called The Cove. Mm-hmm. The Cove Recovery Solutions is y'all's company. How do these things connect, and what's your idea of like, how is this all cohesive? You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So we try to keep our company very clean, right? Very, we deal with a lot of parents, a lot of family members and stuff like that. And it's something that one of my main focuses is going to be the family component of this thing. I think a lot of people have made an effort to do that and are doing well with all our treatment centers and stuff. But I've learned that my family was a huge part of my addiction, a huge part of my recovery. If I don't call my mom like regularly, like my dad texts me about 3 times a year. One's for it's your mom's birthday, it's my birthday, and then one other random one, right? And so there's like the 3 text messages that I know that I'm going to receive. Well, the random one this year was, you haven't talked to your mom in 2 weeks, you need to call her. And I was terrified because like anytime my dad's name comes up on my phone, I'm like immediately shook. Like I don't know what to think. And something about your mom's wondering how you're doing, call her. And I don't know. And apparently it was a joke, but I didn't know that. But I freaked out, so I called my mom. But I call my mom all the time. I try to make it a point to always talk to my mom. And so I've realized with my own recovery that the family is a huge component. So we try to keep in touch with families. We try to, always be, available to any family member, reassure them on what's going on with their loved one, and be focused on both aspects of it all the time, equally focused. So with that, like, we have to kind of keep the, the image
Professional.
Professional. We're relatively professional, but at the end of the day, we're both addicts in recovery. You know what I mean? And so that's what I kind of want this to be, is a place for us to be human too. You know what I mean? Because our clients see us in a certain way, and we get to play around and have fun. But at the end of the day, like, we're still in a leadership position in whatever capacity it may be, whether it be at the Cove or at work, whatever it may be. Like, we are at a certain standard, and we hold ourselves to a certain standard. We hold each other to a certain standard. And this is a place for us to be ourselves and to be able to give a resource. Because like I said, there's a lot of people that either choose not to stay in Lubbock or who have never been to Lubbock. I come from a rural community where I think there's 1 or 2 AA meetings a week. And nothing against old people, but it's just a bunch of old men that have been sober for 30 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, like, it's not conducive for somebody in their early 20s, late 20s, even early 30s to go and have, like, a place to really have a recovery community. And, it's small. And not saying this can make, fill that void in any way, shape, or form, but it can at least I want to be able to give somebody that's hundreds of miles away an opportunity to hear that this happens everywhere too. Like, we struggle with stuff. We have solution for stuff. I want to be able to have people on that are solution focused and have dealt with things in recovery and how they kind of got out of it. And, part of my journey was fitness and kind of getting out of that. I can't call it a dual diagnosis because I've never talked to anybody really. I talked to Amy Lou last year, and she, of course, didn't give me kind of any diagnosis, but she said, here's books to read for eating disorders and things like that. So I took that as, this is enough for me to at least dive into why I deal with his body dysmorphia, with eating disorders and stuff like that, and having some sort of co-occurring disorder.
Right. For those listening, Amy Lou Henley is a dietitian, and she deals with eating disorder stuff, and
she's going straight into her private practice now. So that's all she's doing now. But she was a part of the center for a long time, and gave me some guidance on how I should be feeling as a man in recovery who might be dealing with an eating disorder. Because I think for a long time my compulsion went from drugs, alcohol, to getting sober. Then my compulsion was, women and food. And I ended up, being, I wouldn't necessarily call it food addicted, but I was very dependent on the way food made me feel. Right. And then that got me to a point where I was very upset with the way I looked, very upset with my health and all of those different things. And I was just at this horrible crossroads of, like, I don't want to feel this way anymore, but I also cannot stop eating Whataburger and Qdoba and all these things that make me feel comfortable. I have a huge compulsion with ice cream. I'd get those 1 pints of Bluebell ice cream, and
Cookie two-step, dog.
Oh, the cookie two-step. Woo! I love them. I'd get Rocky Road, cookie two-step, and cookies and cream religiously. Like, there's a Market Street, a 1-minute drive from my house. The Market Street Express closes at 11 p.m. I'd get over there before 11 p.m. every night and buy like 2 or 3 pints, and I'd tell myself I'm only gonna eat one. I'd eat like 1.5, sometimes 2, depending on how sad I was that day.
Right, yeah.
And it just got me into this weird hole of just constant. And I'm lactose intolerant, so that was.
Jeez.
And I would, but it didn't matter because it made me feel better.
Right.
The ice cream was like my thing.
I can relate.
Dairy's my thing, and even though I know what it does to me, I didn't care. And then still, it got me into this really bad cycle. And just overall, this compulsion to want to eat and being dissatisfied with who I am was a huge part of my recovery. And I think that doesn't maybe get talked about enough with men, because it's not a manly problem to have. You know what I mean? It's not a normal thing. I think it's a normal thing for men to deal with, but it's not a manly thing for men to deal with. So I want to be able to talk about that kind of stuff too, and bring that up, and the fact that I dealt with that, and I still deal with that regularly. This is a platform for us to be able to talk about whatever.
And I think, that's important because of what we do. We have clients, and there's certain things that we choose not to get vulnerable about with them, even though they could find it on here and listen to it. It gives us a little more outlet to help other people, because we do disclose some stuff to clients and open up, but this gives us a little better chance of opening up to more people and cutting up, having fun, telling a few more stories than I'll tell other people. But it's good.
What did I miss?
Oh, he just is real bad about not keeping the mic at his mouth.
I'm like, I can feel my mustache.
I know.
Touching it.
I'm gonna switch that mic out for next time.
I felt.
But yeah, I mean, I'm excited about doing more with this. I've already talked to a few people about wanting to come on and talk about a few things, because there's all sorts of different things that we can talk about. And it doesn't have to be 100% recovery related. It can, like, one of the things that I really do want to focus on is the co-occurring disorders, because I deal with the like I talked about, the body dysmorphia and stuff like that. Some relationship codependency is another one that I struggle with pretty hard. Yeah, I mean, I'm a codependent, hardcore codependent, and it's like basically anything that's gonna make me feel different about myself, I dive into it 100%, and it doesn't matter, really what it is. Like, if it makes me feel better, I'm going to dive into it 100%. And so I think it's important to talk about that. It's not just the drugs and alcohol, because just like step one is broken into two different parts, admitted powers over alcohol, and then it stops. There's a hyphen, and it says, and that our life would become unmanageable. That's the part that I've been able to realize is still carrying on throughout my 3.5 years of sobriety, and will probably always be with me for the rest of my life, because there's always going to be some level of unmanageability, no matter how spiritual I am, no matter how much I do whatever I do for my recovery. There's going to be a component of unmanageability, because it's just how everybody is.
Right.
There's a level of unmanageability across the board with humankind.
I think you're right. That is something that I think we deal with in, kind of like you were talking about earlier. Like, you can apply these steps to so many other things, and that's something that I've learned. I heard that in early recovery, but didn't do. And that's something I've learned as more time I get. I can apply these steps to so many different parts of my life.
My friend, her therapist told her that she should try to look at the 12 steps and apply it to her depression.
Yeah.
Anything.
And that's what's really cool about this, and that's something that, like, I would like to we'll talk about on here, is because not many people talk about that. Yeah. And those aren't things that you have to wait until you get a certain amount of time sober to do.
There was one, I can't remember who it was. Somebody I ran into at school, and I mentioned at Tech that and we'll talk about this some more, but Texas Tech has the Center for Collegiate Recovery Communities, and I ran into another student, and I was talking to them. It was a girl that I had met in class, and we were talking about, I think maybe I had mentioned I was in recovery or something, and that always brings up some questions with people around in the class. Sometimes I've had people approach me, and anyways, I was talking about the center, and she was like, "Oh, all those people that smoke cigarettes out front." And I was like, yes, those people that smoke cigarettes out front of the Human Sciences building. And it's like, when you were saying that, I thought of that, because it was like, oh, those people over there, those people that are doing that stuff over there, where we're in recovery and we get to the opportunity to go through this process, are those people over there. Well, the reality is, it doesn't have to just be those people over there. This program can work for anybody.
Right.
This like you talked about, you can apply it to depression, anxiety, trauma, all kinds of different things, because no matter at its core, it's a self-help program that revolves around spirituality.
Yep.
And giving your will and your life over to somebody that you don't know, relinquishing control over what is going on in your life. And something I brought up before, I think us as alcoholics, and anybody that's been through some sort of trauma or difficult life experiences, whatever the case may be, because my trauma, my bottom was different than your bottom is different than your bottom.
Right.
Everybody's different. And so it's on this sliding scale, I guess, or like a spectrum. And so look at life on a scale of 1 to 10. My life at 0, 1, and 2 was different than your life at 0, 1, and 2. But the reality was, it was still a 0, a 1, or 2. Right. When I say that, like, our life is lived on a spectrum of 1 through 10, and 10 being the best day of your life and 0 being the worst day of your life, the depth of your bottom. One of my 1 days could have consisted of less trauma than one of your 1 days. Right. But in my mind, in my perspective, my life, it was still a 1 day, right? It was been categorized as one of my worst days ever. What was going on and the level of trauma objectively is irrelevant. It was still that horrible day for me, right?
Plato said, "Be kind, for everyone is facing an impossible battle." The worst thing that you ever go through is still the worst thing to you. And it's like we compare our traumas, and it seems worse than others. Somebody's mom getting murdered, or this other person's dad was gone. Yeah. But it's still the worst thing you ever went through.
Exactly. Like your traumas are different than my traumas, but to me, my traumas are the worst things. Mm-hmm. To you, they are the worst things. Mm-hmm. It's a spectrum. It can't be hard and fast like, oh, your dad was killed right in front of you. That's horrible, right? That could be one of the worst things that could ever happen to a human being, or you got molested or something like that. Well, that doesn't have to be the baseline for everybody. That's the baseline for the person that it happened to.
Right.
That's the depth for the person it happened to, not for everybody, because not everybody has traumatic experiences like that. But all this being said, we live our lives on the scale of 1 to 10. The people that don't deal with struggles, and I've talked to some normies or whatever that they say, oh, like, my worst day was, like, some kids in high school made fun of me, and like that was the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me. And that is the people that live on between 4, 5, and 6, right in the middle of that scale. So the depths of their lows, their lowest lows, are very minimal. Like, that doesn't cause a lot of stress or trauma in their lives. That is their lowest point, so we have to respect it at that point. But it's not overly traumatic, and they can come back from that relatively easy. They have some talk therapy or whatever, and it's like, oh, I feel so much better. Well, because they only had to go to a 4, they can really only reach a 6, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And so if you get the opportunity to go to a 0 and you sit in those depths of, like, some of my lowest points, I was sitting in my bedroom, trying to figure out what it was in the corner of my room looking at me, and I was terrified, petrified with fear, and I started to realize that the veil of reality was so thin, and that there was something on the other side was right there. And it was terrifying for me, and it was traumatic, and there was things that had led up to that point where I was overwhelmed with fear and this horrible feeling that I was about to get ripped apart, and there was this traumatic experience in my life. That was what I would consider a 0, right? There's a lot of details in that I'm going to leave out, but like, that was one of the most traumatic, terrifying nights of my life, and that's where I would consider a 0. But since I've experienced that, I feel like that's given me the opportunity to be grateful. And now I get to go into the other side of the spectrum, and I get to experience those 9s and 10 days. And because I know how far to the left it can go. Right. I know how deep it can go. And so whenever I experience something that's, relatively normal, happy, joyous moment, it's like I get the opportunity to be very grateful for that. And so it makes me feel even better than it would normally make me feel. Right. And Dr. Brene Brown talks about the correlation between gratitude and joy. Like, the most joyful people in the world, statistically, are the people who practice some sort of gratitude, whether it be some, like, gratitude journal or anything like that, or just expressing their gratitude for whatever it is they're doing. Like, that's where I get that kind of that scale, that 0 to 10, because if it isn't for those really horrible times in my life, I wouldn't be as grateful for the opportunity to go to school. Like, if I would have just gone straight into school, after I got out of high school, it would have just been like, okay, well, this is how it's supposed to be, almost like a privilege. Well, I didn't. You know, I ended up having a daughter at 19 and then going to school or going to work and then becoming a drunk and an addict and all these horrible things that got me into that position of being on that night where I was feeling overwhelmed with terror. And so now the opportunity to go to school is so much more like present. Like it feels so much more, so much more like an opportunity. And I'm grateful for that at a different level than I could ever possibly be grateful for. And it stresses me the fuck out. I'm going into debt. I'm constantly going into a big amount of debt. Like, the student loan organization can just go ahead and chalk that one up because I've already forgiven my student loans. You know what I mean? They can chalk that one up as a loss. But that between the debt and the deadlines and like some of the classes that I'm dealing with are like how to buy a car, and like one of my PFP is like, this is the way to get a good interest rate, and it's like I've done that a lot.
I failed the fuck out of that class.
I failed it once alreay, and I'm taking it again.
I passed it my first time, boys.
Yeah, but you used people in this. Okay, you utilized your resources.
I did. Sure did.
I like the professionalism twist on that.
And like all of these different things that are like, I don't like school sometimes. I don't like being here. I don't like doing it, and it stresses me out. But fuck, I'm grateful that I'm there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because it just seems like who the fuck am I to be at a Division I university taking classes in that position? Who am I to be in that position? You know what I mean? I used to do some really stupid shit, man. If you would have saw me in 2016, you would and somebody said, "Oh yeah, he's gonna be in college one day, and he's gonna be doing what he's doing." Nope.
I was thinking about this the other day. Is like, I'm so fucking busy, 2 jobs, school, fucking all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And like, it drives me fucking crazy sometimes. But I was thinking about it, like, I used to sell weed for a living. And like that, like I was just as busy then for like an 1/8 of the amount of productivity that I actually am cranking out now. You know what I mean? And I was just constantly running around town, getting this guy what I need, picking this person up, getting re-upping, getting this cash, fucking stupid shit that was like, in my mind back then, I was like, oh yeah, I'm fucking, like I am the same level of busy or more, probably more now, but like my productivity and positivity is like 400% fold. You know what I mean?
Because you're grateful for it.
For sure.
Back then it was like, this is I'm owed this.
I have to do this. Yeah.
This is,
I get to do this now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a strange concept, or it's strange how much gratitude impacts my life. It just in general. Like I tell like the people that I'm close to, I try to make a point to tell them I'm grateful for them. You know what I mean? Because then it's like, that's the highest regard that I can hold somebody, is that I'm grateful for you, because I can love a lot of people. I can really enjoy being around a lot of people. I can enjoy spending time around a lot of people. But if I'm grateful for somebody in my life, it means so much more, because that brings me pure joy. Mm-hmm. That's where I actually experience the joy that I get to experience.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't know where we're going with that, but...
But we're over an hour now. So, I mean, I guess, this is the introduction episode, and then I guess we're going to go weekly.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do you have a first guest lined up that we can kind of...
Not yet, but there's a lot of things that I really want to talk about for the company, but it's like one day away from it being concrete.
Okay. So maybe next week we can.
So because there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, because there's some really cool changes happening right now, but they won't be concrete until tomorrow. Okay. And so, I mean, it's like a 95% everything's done. The papers just got to be signed. We've I can say we've spent a lot of money in the last couple of weeks preparing for something. And we've just got to get in there tomorrow, make sure everything's good, set, ready to go, sign the paperwork, and we're ready to, then we'll set a date. So we'll set a date tomorrow, and then we can talk about it next week, what that is and what it's going to look like and how it's going to affect the company. And we're going to have a lot of cool stuff to go on. As soon as all this COVID stuff is over, it's going to get even better, But we've been able to work pretty hard to get where we're at today, and tomorrow we'll have some really cool stuff happening. But yeah, I mean we're just trying to continue to always be better today than we were yesterday.